Our guest for this hour is the Cabinet Secretary in the Ministry of Defense, Dr. Monica Juma. Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
From that proverb, an envious person requires no reason to be green with envy. I was asking them, what is the difference between envy and jealousy?
I'm not very good with proverbs, so I think Prof can proceed to explain that difference.
You see,
He's the wise man here.
actually, every time or any time someone tells you you're wise, what they're inadvertently referring to
You're old.
is chronology at here. Okay. They just want to, okay, so hatutakuita mzee, lakini we will just call you wise. But you understand that what we mean is you're actually quite old. So now, as an old person, let me speak. You see, these are sometimes referred to as vices, and yet they're an integral part of what we human beings are. And honestly, part of the reason why people are motivated to do certain things is because of these two qualities, the jealousy and envy. When somebody has achieved something that you feel you ought to have, it can motivate you to pursue it. If you find that in a relationship something is amiss because somebody is comparing what they have and what they could have and what they don't have, it could spur you to also seek to attain that very thing that is a subject or the genesis of this emotion that we refer to as jealousy. Yes. So if, for instance, I have a friend who is always telling me about how beautiful his wife is, I will go back and look at my wife and ask, what can I do to ensure that my wife can be referred to in similar terms?
By that man or by
But
you?
exactly.
It usually isn't by me because I'm actually happy with my wife.
You want
It is,
somebody else to say your
it
wife
is, it is
beautiful.
what other people, and that's why if it is just by me, it wouldn't be jealousy. There has to be a third party for this thing to work. So it is essentially, these things have to do not with you, but external factors that elicit this. And it also points to a feeling of inadequacy that you may have.
Right.
Yes.
Dr. Juma, the Ministry of Defense, in recent time past, it has been right now in the headlines, positively, of course, because of the work that they've been doing. But before we get into what the work that they have been doing, let's first of all understand the Ministry of Defense and the Department of Defense. Are they one and the same? Where is the linkage between the Chief of Defense Forces and the Cabinet Secretary for Defense?
Thank you very much, Latif, for that question. The Ministry of Defense, of course, is one of the 20-some ministries of this country, but it is organized around two plaques. It has a uniformed plaque, which is headed by the Chief of Defense Forces, and there is a civilian plank. The reason for this is because this country is a democracy, and there's the presumption of a civilian authority oversight over any uniformed formation. And this is not just for the defense forces. It is similar with the police force, for example. It is similar with the prison services, for example. It is similar with the Kenya Wildlife Services, and any uniformed cadre is constitutionally under civilian administration. So the Ministry of Defense is organized in that fashion. There are not two ministries. There is one ministry headed by a cabinet secretary.
So you provide now the civilian oversight
Absolutely.
of what's happening
Yes,
in our
I do.
defense.
Yes, I do. That is my mandate.
So you can say you're
I'm the CS Defense.
the senior most civilian in the military.
That's true.
So in
That's
military
true.
terms, you would be a field marshal.
No, I'm not in the military, so there are no military terms applicable to me. There are no
Okay.
military terms applicable to me.
So if we just look at the Moi years, the military was military, and there was no direct Ministry of Defense. It was falling under the office of the president. Was that it?
Well, that is not exactly true. And I think that goes to the way a head of state organizes organizes the delivery of his mandate. So it is not inconceivable to have the Ministry of Information under the presidency. You know, it depends on how the president conceives of the administrative aspect for the delivery of his oath of office. And so in certain countries, you would find, for example, marine under the presidency. For instance, in countries that are maritime countries, and consider that this is an important aspect, it may be placed under the presidency. So the organization of government takes various formations depending on the interpretation of what would be delivered best within what structure. And when we began, it is true, there were portfolios under the office of the president. Our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for example, the first Minister of Foreign Affairs was the president. Okay? President Jomo Kenyatta was the first foreign minister. So it depends on how you want our government is organized, and that is the prerogative of the chief executive.
Okay. Now, looking at the military and how then it has, worked in recent years, let me just go back to like the Kibaki years. The Kibaki years, we saw President Mwai Kibaki then established the Ministry of Defense, and at the same time started tapping some senior officers in the military to come and perform other functions. So, for example, the then Brigadier Mohammed Hussein Ali came and became the Commissioner of Police.
Correct.
We have seen the same under the Uhuru administration, but now we're also seeing an instance where a function is hived off one ministry and brought to the Ministry of Defense, Kenya Meat Commission. We also see the military officers assisting some civilian functions, like we see military officers working in the railways, ministry officers also working in other civilian arms. What's that linkage? Do they work under you, or do they then work, for example, when the military officers are assisting Kenya Railways, is that the Ministry of Defense assisting Kenya Railways, or is that the military wing of defense assisting Kenya Railways?
Well, let me just begin by, first of all, debunking this notion that there is movement into the military, into the defense, Nothing new, really. When I was in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we were the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Trade.
Yeah.
Today, the portfolio of trade is sitting with the Ministry of Industrialization, Trade and Cooperative Affairs. How come this has not become an issue? And this is within this tenure, and the portfolio of trade is one of the biggest portfolio because we are a trading nation. In fact, you would expect that this would be a big conversation. No, it's not, because there's nothing new. There's nothing wrong about it. And the Department of Cooperative, it's been moved from there. Department of Petroleum and Energy, it's gone to mining, it's gone to energy, it's gone. Listen, there is nothing extraordinary that has happened. And in fact, the notion, when you come down to the Meat Commission, for example, this is a state corporation. Again, you will see a lot of movement if you actually do your research. Of the 200 and some corporations, they have been moving everywhere because the idea is to try and place them in an administrative framework that helps them to deliver on their mandate. Having said that, generally, when you come to the Ministry of Defense, I think it will be instructive for people to look at what the mandate of the Ministry of Defense is from a constitutional point of view. The Constitution provides for three key functions of the Ministry of Defense. First, we defend and protect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of this nation. That's the core mandate. Second, we offer aid to civil authorities constitutionally. That means that you can actually, and this explains why we do things like when there is a drought, we can provide logistics to move food. When there is a flood, we secure people. When there is an accident, a fire in the KWH Conservancy, we will be there. This is aid to civil authorities, and it is there provided for within the Constitution. Thirdly, if there is disturbance in the country, with the authority of Parliament, we can deploy to restore peace and stability. So those are three. And so anything you see that has been done by the Ministry of Defense, it is actually within that constitutional mandate, nothing outside of it. So the provision, for example, the question you ask about the railway, when we are called to support in the rehabilitation of the railway, it is part of the second mandate provided for in the Constitution.
I think the first mandate is where all attention stops.
Correct.
When you look at the protection of the defense and sovereignty of a nation, that is what everybody hears when we hear the Ministry of Defense.
Yeah.
So then when you see that there is support being offered, or that there is activity in what would be otherwise labeled as purely civilian activity, then you think that there is a shift in focus. And I'm being very clear about what, sentiments that have come out over the last few, is that there is a shift in focus away from the sovereignty or the protection of the land.
But you can't shift from your own mandate, as I've explained. Providing civil assistance to our civil authorities does not preclude the mandate of territorial defense and protection of territorial integrity. So it is not either or. We are conceived to deliver on those three, and we are doing that. Yeah. So one does not take over or is not done in lieu of the other.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how far can this go? I mean,
well, in fact, there's a huge doctrine around civil-mil relations. Huge doctrine, and it is not a new one. If anyone is interested in the history of this, it starts as early as the debates around the philosopher king and the defenders who protect the protectors kind of debate. It's a big debate. It's a historical debate, and the notion of civil oversight is precisely to balance that, so that you say you can oversight over the protectors, and within the democratic theory, about people's sovereignty over every instrument of power, in this case, the defense force, yeah? But increasingly, and this is not just about Kenya, countries have deployed their defense competencies for a number of things. And if you look at, again, the history of industrialization, a lot of militaries have been the vanguard of industrial, transformation. Yep. So nothing new, nothing new. And I think what is happening now is that the administration is deploying competencies that are within itself to add value, to optimize their value for society. Many countries, including on this continent, whether large and small, whether they're talking about Egypt, whether they're talking about South Africa, whether they're talking about Rwanda, the role of the military in contributing to national development is not a matter of debate. It's a matter of course, and so it is really deploying, and as I've said before, I think the smart thing a country does is to deploy the full range of its competencies. And in the MOD, we have those competencies, and we have been asked to deploy them. We've done it, and it is working. It is working.
It's true. I mean, if you look at the cadres in the military, there's all the professions are there.
True.
And you're highly well-trained and highly motivated officers who serve in our military. But then, if you look at the examples that you've given in Rwanda, if you look at Uganda, if you look at South Sudan, the relationship between the military and the civil is almost one and the same. It starts from one into the other. In this country, we haven't had that kind of direct, say, application of our military. I'm trying to look for the words here. Application of our military in the daily civil, say, aid to civil authorities. It's not daily, it's on one-offs. We have
it's this, very limited.
We have this disaster, then come in. We have this and the other now come in. But now it seems to be increasing, and that's what the question is. Why now? What is changing? Is it a factor of the times we are living in, or is it a factor of certain realizations within the civil leadership of the country?
Well, one of the things, for example, even the responses that we are used to, namely responding to emergencies, there is no doubt that the frequency of emergency and calamity is growing. This is not a Kenyan phenomenon. I mean, we are having cyclic droughts, cyclic floods, cyclic fires. So it is likely that you're seeing more and more deployment because of this reality. And that reality, in fact, if we didn't do that, would be failing. Would be failing in our core mandate. So that response is not an issue. Well, what has become a big public debate is one issue around the KMC, you know, and really this is a very small part of our aid to civil authority if you looked at it in the totality of the work that we are doing. And I think the question must be, why such public interest, you know? And I've actually been asking myself, why in KMC? It's not the largest portfolio.
Could I attempt
by
to
the
answer
way.
that?
Yeah. So, yeah.
If I attempt to answer that, if you look at, just like I said, start with the Kibaki years, and you see military officers coming to serve in the civilian side of government, and then you see more and more. You see retired military officers being deployed as ambassadors. We see retired military officers, well, we have been used to that. Former general gets to serve in a certain board, and that they're offering that kind of oversight of a parastatal. But getting into the cabinet, getting into principal secretary, getting into Inspector General of Police, getting into a former military officer who is heading anti-corruption, we are seeing more and more retired major general, retired lieutenant, and that's where now it goes into, it's not longer retired, it is current,
Active.
Go to KMC.
No, listen, let me put it this way. First of all, every officer serving in the KDF or in the MOD is a Kenyan. I mean, let's start there, you know.
Yeah.
This notion that there are Kenyans who can't serve because of where they were before, I think in and of itself is really misguided. Huh? It doesn't go to, the same questions are not asked on the civilian side. In fact, the civilian side, you say, is this person qualified? The big debate is, are they qualified?
Yeah.
And I wish that was the debate that we were having here. Is this person delivering? Because I think this notion that somebody has been uniformed and therefore somehow they are sinister. You know, they are sinister, and you must.
Well, there's an element of control they want to wield.
Yeah, you know, they are sinister. You know, their work is to control people, and maybe I don't know what else they are going to do with us. I think it's a very wrong thing. Let's start from the premise that we are dealing with Kenyans. Okay, are they able to deliver on the mandate? And I think if we ask that question, it would be a proper question to ask, because the idea is to improve on the services. The idea is to improve on the pursuit of the national aspirations in terms of our development plans and things like that. You know, and the question that must be asked, even of this persistent question of the KMC, is there a turnaround? Is there a turnaround? What is the turnaround looking like? And is there a lesson that can be transferable from this to maybe another agency?
Can I ask you then, do you think it can be delivered? Because if we look at KMC, it was not a dying, it was dead. If we look at what was happening in Nairobi, for example, many would argue that the city was falling apart. So do you think then that with the invitation and the entrance then of whether they're active or retired, military officers, doesn't matter, do you think then some order and then some reorganization in the operations of these two, as an example, could yield results?
Well, I think that question can be answered by Kenyans who are receiving the services. I mean, it is self-explanatory. When we went into the KMC, we found a situation. The first briefing I received said, you know, this place slaughters between 3 and 7 cows a day. Facts don't lie. This was the situation on the ground. And we said, 7 cows a day?
A local butcher could do that.
What is the portfolio, 347.
Slaughtering
Really?
7 cows.
What are we paying per month? You know, we could buy those cows from that money 10 times, 5 times, you know. Do we need it then? And you go in and you say, okay, I need a plan. I need a plan to turn this thing around. And you have 60 days to turn this thing around. What requires to happen? And what requires to happen happens. What requires to happen happens. Within 60 days, we began to test the system. Yeah, we began to test the system. And we used a month to test the system. And we were ready. I was satisfied that we could roll out. Right now, we are providing meat across this country to all the defense units. From the 1st of June, we began to provide to the other security sector. We have gone around the country, 17 counties in total that have livestock as their mainstay, to explain the model that we are going to use, and to explain how we will receive, and to explain how we'll process, and to explain the business process. So it is not whether it will happen, it is happening.
So it took 60 days for a plan to be developed, for you to approve it, for it to be put into motion, and for it to actually be actualized.
Yes.
Within 60 days.
Within 90 days, 60 days, we began to test, and within 90 days, we rolled.
So what was the problem?
The problem
What did
was
you bring
from
in?
slaughtering 7 cows, we are at the point now of doing 200. And we believe that by the end of this year, we will be doing close to 2,000 a day. We should.
From the initial analysis, why were they doing only 6-7 cows a day?
Well, they could answer that, but clearly there was a lot of systems that were not functional. Okay, number one. There was a very huge lack of proper supervision, you know. There was no business processes, you know. So it didn't matter. Farmers would come and they literally want to get into the slaughterhouse with their cows to make sure the cow is going to, you know. Yeah, things like that just add to the cost of doing business and that make it very difficult to be productive, frankly.
But Madam CS, there's an element of order that comes with the military.
That's correct.
And everybody knows about that. There's an element of operation. Certain things are done in a certain way. And you even see this outside of work. It's carried on into the lives of these individuals. Do you think that this plays a role in what we are seeing and what could be if it's picked up in other sectors?
It's about doctrine. I mean, I know a little bit about the other sectors, but in the military, there is a doctrine. It helps to have a clarity of vision. It's very clear, this is what we are doing, this is how we are going to do it, and you are the one who will deliver on this. So it's very clear who is going to deliver on what. But more importantly, it is also very clear to everybody that there are consequences for not following through. It is very clear. So it's about the clarity of the objective. It's about the understanding of the modality. It's about the discipline, the commitment to stay the course. And it's about delivering, you know. So it's an entire doctrine.
Yeah.
And that, I think that is important. That is very, very important, not just in the military. Frankly, it is important for any enterprise that functions and that delivers. You have to have all those elements.
You know, you asked this question, Madam Secretary, why was KMC such a big hoo-ha? If we weren't on this continent, and if the military was not considered to be part of our establishment that deals with external aggression, and if we didn't have Mali happening, and we didn't have other parts of the continent and countries around the continent where the armed forces got into civilian life forcibly through coups, the discussion on the military wouldn't be an issue. Partly because people perceive the military, should we say, suspiciously, because the military doesn't interact with civilians on a daily basis as does the police force. But even more significantly, there is the understanding of security. When we talk security, we are thinking thugs, hoodlums to be dealt with by police. We're thinking of a war, insurgents coming into the country. But I am of this view that the real security of the country has nothing to do with any of this. It has to do with the population of that particular country, the citizenry, being at ease and in understanding that their affairs are being looked after in the manner that they expect.
Correct.
That to me is actually security. Because,
A government that delivers.
yes, because then that government can enjoy the support of the citizenry. Now, that is security.
On that very good note, let's take a break and then CS, you can come and comment on that. 28 minutes to 9 o'clock. We are having a conversation with Dr. Monica Juma, the CS in the Ministry of Defense. The role of the Military of Defense in national development is what we're talking about. Now, we'll be focusing on the Kenya Meat Commission and what they have been able to do, what they are doing, what the plans are going forward. And then also we look at, so if this can happen in 90 days, what else can happen in even 30 days or 15 days or longer? Good morning. Kenya's biggest conversation continues shortly on KTN Home, on Spice FM, and online. We'll be back.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. Spice up your life.
The Situation Room is Eric Latif, Ndu Oko CT Muga, and the Cabinet Secretary for the Ministry of Defense, Dr. Monica Juma. At what point do we insert Ambassador?
It's your choice.
Ambassador Doctor.
This
Doctor
is-
Ambassador.
This is really good. I am actually going to go to town on this one,
Really?
Your Excellency. Plenipotentiary.
Yes, extraordinary.
Yes.
All protocols observed.
All
Yes.
protocols observed.
And none left out.
Right. Talking about the role of the Ministry of Defense in national development, and especially now focusing on Kenya Meat Commission, which the MOD took over operations of recently, and we saw the president going in to launch the new revamped Kenya Meat Commission. Remember those days, City, when KMC used to do a lot of nyama, corned beef and all.
see?
We used
Did
to
I not
export.
tell you?
I'm reminding you, not. I'm not.
No, go
remember
on, Eric.
means that it's a
Yes,
time when I
yes,
was
yes.
also alive.
It was a long time ago. Yes,
When
I was
you-
an adult
when
and
Eric
you
was a
and-
boy.
and-
I was a
and-
baby.
and you're still probably walking barefooted. Okay, carry on. Yes,
Do you remember?
I remember.
Lovely meat coming out of Kenya Meat Commission. And then over the years, we basically got to a point where we're not getting.
My friend, we were a major exporter. Forget providing meat for the exporter of meat products. Working for KMC was considered to be something to be extremely proud of. It's something when someone said they worked for KMC, you felt this is somebody who has a privileged position, is working for
It is
an
like
agency
Railway
that you can
Sport
be
and
proud of.
KMC.
Yes. But I guess all other agencies, like when you talk, someone worked for the railway, it was something to be proud of. If someone worked for Kenya Ports Authority, it was something to be proud of. Put it this way, when you worked for the government, it was something to be proud of.
Yeah.
Yes.
If we look at this country and how many people are actually involved in beef production or just meat production, whether it's cows, sheep, goats, pigs, everything else,
Camels,
camels,
donkeys.
it's a very big industry. And seeing now that KMC is being revived, is it also now targeting and looking back at how do you support the very many Kenyans who rely on beef, on meat as their source of livelihood?
Oh, that is the intention. And when this instruction came to us, when this transfer came to us, it was very clear that we did not have the option of failing. It was very clear from the start. And so we set our minds to revamping this strategic institution. And I am confident that we are heading back to those days, and better places. Because, as you have said, the problem is not one of the market. It is not one of the farmers. But we also believe there is another benefit in terms of even reducing the challenges we've been seeing with cattle rustlings and things like that. We are hoping that we can help have farmers form cooperatives within the livestock, and so that we can begin to uptake within a cooperative framework to help with the squabbles that we've been hearing, especially in the livestock growing areas. So it's not just about the commercial side of it. I think it will have an effect also of stabilizing the industry and the entire value chain. But also from a security point of view, we believe that it is going to contribute to stability and peaceful coexistence.
Looking at the 3 mandates, I mean, just coming off of KMC and all that's going on there, the 3 mandates that you have to then fulfill as a ministry, and then coming to the issue of funding from the national government, is it enough to cover the country? Is it enough to fulfill those 3 mandates at the moment?
Well, funding has never been sufficient, even at a personal level. Yeah, we always.
Yeah, I can tell you a story.
Really. All of us are struggling. All of us are struggling with budgets, from the most micro point to the macro point as the government. And there is no doubt that, given the experience of this nation in the last 1 year with COVID, there's a lot of constriction in terms of the exchequer. So it's not a problem of the Ministry of Defense only. And that is why a conversation then began in terms of how do we deploy our competencies again so that we can become a contributor to the exchequer. Part of this what we are doing is actually in that direction. And the standing of the shipyard is principally in this direction, because this establishment is which has already begun the construction of MV Uhuru 2, is intended to catalyze the development of the ship industry, so that we are able to build, we are able to maintain, we are able to repair ships, not just for the Navy, but for the entire stakeholders that deal with an array of the blue economy, whether it is in terms of fishermen, whether it is in terms of tourism, whether it is in terms of surveillance and things like that. And so we are quite excited because we are seeing not just the contribution in terms of industrialization, technology transfer, but we are seeing the possibility of accruing for the exchequer resources that can begin to contribute, and reduce the stress levels in terms of the resources. But resources are never enough. We could do with a little more, and as I'm sure many other ministries would too.
If I look at the budget allocation for this particular year, this very contentious one, your ministry it's reported that your ministry has gotten a boost of 6 billion.
Well, when you look at it cumulative, that's what it looks like. But I want you to look at that in relation to the tasks assigned. In that year, we also carried a substantial increase of new tasks. So really that budget was not
it's following
an
functions.
increase, it's following functions, frankly. So we are not, because there's also this perception that we are kind of favored in such a way.
Actually, why I brought it in.
And this is not true. I mean, this is not true if you look at the percentages and if you look at the roles that we are playing. But most importantly, if you look at the deployment of the resources against output. Because I think that is what measures.
I think you've gotten the heart of the matter, because I brought it up because I was looking at that increase and I'm looking at the increased activities and the demands on the services, and I'm asking from a purely commercial perspective, all right? What then do we expect as a commensurate output from this particular input?
Let me just remind us. When we helped the Kenya Railways to revamp the Thika Nanyuki Railway, nobody is looking at what has been the input of that commercially, in terms of the haulage of cargo, in terms of the reduction of cost of the cargo, in terms of saving the weight carriage on roads, for example. The day when the president was relaunching the KMC, we had the first wagon delivery of animals from Laikipia. Okay? So if you look at just the commercial impact of that railway, the amount of money we spend in terms of rehabilitating it has probably been recouped manyfold back, you know. So just revamping that railway is resuscitating the economy of that entire belt, you know, that entire belt. So the idea is to catalyze that development. And I am waiting to see, once we relaunch the Nakuru Kisumu rail, the impact of that. And this is coming from looking at MV Uhuru 1. From when we launched it, when we refurbished MV Uhuru 1, to date, we have hauled upwards of 60 million tons of fuel into Port Bell. Okay? That has translated into reduction of cost of fuel in Uganda, for example. Impact of that on the spillage of oil. I mean, and all the shenanigans that go with it.
Yeah.
The destruction on the roads, the accidents on the road. Listen, if you just did a complete calculation of the impact of that act, then you begin to see the multiplier effect. Its effect on Kisumu itself and Port Bell and so forth. So facts are there, and frankly, the beauty about facts is that they don't lie.
Something that you mentioned, that you're now looking at how can you assist in contributing to this kitty that you draw from.
Absolutely.
So is this like a formation of a military-industrial complex where you're saying the military now are getting more and more involved in commercial ventures? The shipyard, you've talked about Kenya Meat Commission. We talk about when you're coming in to assist the Kenya Railways and what you put in, the small arms factory and many others. Are we seeing our military now looking, or our Ministry of Defense looking at how it then becomes a commercial entity?
Not a commercial entity. It's how, and I have to say this, from the Defense Council, we have processed, and up to the National Security Council, a policy on industrialization, military industrialization, within the framework of contributing again to the larger aspiration of the nation towards industrialization. Because you said, how does the military contribute to this agenda of government? And we are not going to do this in an haphazard manner, you know. So we do have a policy that has been processed through government. And yes, so that is one of the big ones. But in relation to ourselves, it's the only way, in my mind, that you begin to create self-sufficiency. And one of the lessons we have learned is that when you have global constriction, either because of a phenomenon like COVID-19, it can have profound impact on your operations. Because where you are getting your materials, that you can't move those materials, and this can actually impact even your core mandate. Okay? And this is why we are now focusing on some very strategic issues around our own self-sufficiency in terms of critical assets that we will require to perform our mandate. And hence this whole question about the small arms industry and things like that. But it's not just the small arms industry. We've already established a school or a center of excellence in aviation training, we so that we can reduce the amount of monies we are spending to train our pilots outside. It costs an enormous amount of money to train one fighter pilot, for example. But if we can do it at home, then you reduce that cost significantly. And so we have established an aviation training center of excellence, not just for ourselves, for the region, but we are also thinking in terms of increasing the safety of our airspace. So even the civilian pilots and things like that, we do not want to see the kind of some of the things we are seeing of planes dropping from the sky, because we've not created a standard, you know, that can be ascertained, you know, from a competency point of view. And so we are contributing to our own in terms of the quality and standard of the Kenya Air Force. But at the same time, we understand that part of that country's safety must also extend to the civilians, stakeholders in this.
I'm looking at, say, for instance, our Defense Staff College.
Correct.
And I'm looking at the level of competency and excellence that even draws from not just our neighbors, but from the African continent.
Correct. Correct.
So it actually means that the things you're doing have been doable for a long time.
Correct.
I'm not going to ask a political question. I'm just going to go to the shipyard business. Southern Engineering builds ferries. Is the work of the shipyard going to complement the sort of work that is done by organizations like, say, Southern Engineering? Are they going to look at ways of cooperating? Because why do I say this? We seem to import our ferries. We bring them. And yet, some of our neighbors have been acquiring their ferries from...
A Kenyan-based company.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I think we are trying to stop the idea of importing. In fact, one of the major components of this process is technology transfer. It was very interesting for me to see MV Uhuru 1 before the work. MV Uhuru 1 was plying that route for many decades, since 19-something, in the early century.
It was last century, around
yes.
the 60s. there.
Okay. So, but the most interesting thing is that it became clear that whoever built it and brought it, just built it and brought it. There was not any element of technology transfer. And so when it ground to a halt, it just ground to a halt. Okay? It has been fascinating to watch the process of rehabilitating that vessel and the learning that has come out of it. The idea that we must make sure whoever we partner with, there is a framework for technology transfer. And we have worked that out very carefully, that by the time we are finishing with MV Uhuru 2, and by the time we begin to work on some of the vessels in the Navy, there will be substantial technology transfer, and we'll be taking in orders. Actually, I can tell you we've started to do that in preparation even for Mutongwe. So the shipyard that is sitting in Mutongwe is going to be the largest on the continent, you know. And so we have telescoped this, not for now. We are telescoping this to make us a major player in this industry, certainly on the African continent. And that is why I can speak with a bit of confidence in terms of where we are going.
A bit. That's a lot of confidence.
You're breathing with confidence.
Yeah. There's been a lot of thinking around this. There's been a lot of hours that have been applied to this.
Dr. Monica Juma, Cabinet Secretary in the Ministry of Defense, is with us in the studio. We want to say goodbye to our audience on KTN Home who've been with us since the top of the hour. It's time for you to take a break, but you can switch over to the conversation on Spice FM wherever you are. 94.4 Nairobi, Mombasa 87.9, 102.5 in Kisumu, 96.0 in Nakuru, 96.7 in Eldoret, Nyeri 90.9, Malindi 97.7, or you can follow us on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube because we are live streaming there as well. Spice FM KE is any of those platforms. Good morning.
Spice FM. Nyeri. This is the Situation Room. The only way to start your day. Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings
All right, Dr. Juma,
done right.
as we conclude the conversation
94.
today, there are very many people who, like we started the conversation, there are those who are looking at this and wondering, so what is the end goal here in terms of the Ministry of Defense getting more and more involved here? How would you allay the fears of those that may still be having those fears? And how would you encourage those that are not encouraged or those that require that encouragement of let's use what we have as a resource in our military?
I think we've not done very well in terms of explaining to the public. I think that's the problem, probably. But I think every Kenyan should walk with a great measure of pride in relation to our defense forces. We have one of the most respected globally defense forces, professional, disciplined, that has proven itself in terms of execution. And this is not just in terms of our own national interest, even in terms of contributing to international peace and security. We have deployed to more than 44 peace support operations in the world. And we continue to be asked to do this, to make this contribution. So every Kenyan should really walk tall, because this is a force for good. And the deployments that we have had in terms of contributing to national development are aimed to enhance services to our nation and to contribute to our national development. So we should all be very proud of having a military force like the one we do, that is constitutionally compliant and that is serving this motherland with distinction.
Indeed they are, and we want to send you with a message back to them. All of them, from the general to the junior officers, proud of what they do.
Thank you.
In the defense of our country and also in supporting civilian operations.
Thank you very
City,
much.
did I speak on your behalf as well?
You spoke wisely, my brother.
Very good, very good. Dr. Monica Juma, Dr. Ambassador Dr. Monica Juma, Cabinet Secretary for Defense. Thank you very much for joining us. We hope to host you again soon.
Thank you very much.
Asante
It's
sana.
been a pleasure.
Good evening, everybody. How you doing?
Spice FM.